Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 25 series. Can we save the Oakland A's? And this episode will be part 2 of our season recap. It's a very happy season recap for the Oakland A's after our team won it all this past season. A wild card team that made it into the playoffs, and then overall a 13-4 record in the postseason, as we ended up winning it all 7-6 in Game 4 of the World Series against Atlanta, who we took out in a sweep. Last time around, we took a look at our Major League roster and started talking about some initial plans for this offseason. Appreciate all of you who have opined on the Yanquiel Fernandez situation, a player who we rented this past year. Didn't do much for us in the regular season, but had a monster playoff run for us. Looking for pretty big money, over $13 million a year for 4 years, for a guy who's going to be 34 years old soon and is slightly below average in terms of his contact and his eye. And I think I broadly agree with the assessments from the worldwide scouting department. Peter Hooper, Paul West, Alkshi, Bladestaff, Sean Gratton, Avery Shaham, Coach 1549, all kind of felt like it was the right move to move on from Yanquiel Fernandez, potentially give some more playing time to Luis Taveras, maybe Sergio Palomares, some other players in our organization. Or also, maybe we can find an upgrade at outfielder through the trade or the free agent market as this offseason moves on. So, since we haven't moved forward yet in this offseason, haven't made any official decisions yet, but tend to think that I do agree with the worldwide scouting department and will probably be letting Mr. Fernandez hit free agency. So one of the things that we like to do in these season recap episodes is take a look at how some of our former players and how some of the top prospects in baseball are progressing. Shoji Bame, the Japanese import who we missed out in signing several years ago, at this point is still in his contract with the Dodgers. Played only 89 games this year, hit .248 with 21 homers and 58 ribbies in 306 at-bats. 147 WRC plus was one of his most successful major league seasons. In fact, it was the highest he's ever been in his 5 years in Major League Baseball. The issue, of course, is that he only played 89 games. But still a reasonably productive offensive player, but at $31.5 million, probably not the type of number that we could afford. Byron Brain, who we traded away a year ago to Miami in that very significant trade that brought us both the starting pitcher Kevin Patterson and first baseman Andy Brailovsky. Spent the full year in Miami. Batted just a .191. Did have 25 homers and 58 ribbies and 397 at-bats. 60 walks. But he did strike out over 200 times in less than 400 at-bats. Guessing that might be the first time that's ever happened in Major League Baseball history. Overall, a 93 WRC plus, a little below replacement. Has that profile that we've experimented with off and on over the years of this playthrough, but still not a profile that we're really thrilled with. We're happy with the value we got in return for him. Sergio Figueroa, on the other hand, is a guy that we may regret trading away. Number 80 prospect in baseball. Hit .261 with 24 homers and 66 ribbies in 456 at-bats for the Astros this year. Overall put up a 121 WRC plus. He was part of a big package that got us Brian Ramos as a rental several years ago, and Figueroa has developed into a pretty interesting looking left-handed hitting outfielder. Bertrand Albrighton was once one of our top prospects. Split the year between AAA Tacoma and Seattle, hit .230 in 183 at-bats at the major league level, 75 WRC plus. Always loved the personality of Bertrand Albrighton, but unfortunately the Dominator has not ended up being a particularly dominant major league player. Bobby Cabral, with a similar batting profile to the aforementioned Byron Brain, was not good after we traded him to Seattle. Hit a .181 in 204 at-bats. Did have a little more pop than he had with us this year, with 11 homers and 31 ribbies, but an 80 WRC plus, remains a below replacement level player. Think that we did very well to get the last 2 to 4 years of his contract off of our books when we did. Arturo Estrada led the American League this year with 658 bats and hit .301 in those 658 bats, almost 200 hits, scored 93 runs, only 49 ribbies, not a lot of extra base power, and particularly not a lot of home run power. Overall, it was a 94 WRC plus, but still put up a 3.2 WAR. He was 36 out of 38 on the base paths. Estrada, John Thomas, you may remember, was another guy who was at one point one of the top prospects in our system. We traded him away for a rental of Juan Soto. Looks like at the age of 25, Estrada finally making a case to be a full-time major leaguer with that 300 batting average, but it does say a lot about him and some of his other skills, particularly the lack of power and the pretty mediocre eye that he hit .301 this year and was still overall a below-average offensive player. And Kevin Stubblefield, who we once thought we might be building around at first base, split the season between AAA Worcester and the Red Sox. Hit .271 in 107 major league at-bats, was basically a league average offensive player and just slightly above replacement level. Turning to a few pitchers, Andres Rojas, we've talked about this many times. We hoped we were going to get the knuckleballer with the 53rd pick in the draft back in 2027. Went 6 picks before then, and we've been regretting that ever since. The win-loss record this year in Miami at the age of 29 was pretty rough at 10-17, but he still hit a sub-3 ERA, 231 strikeouts, and a 5.8 WAR. So Mr. Rojas remains one of the top pitchers in baseball. Joe Lewin, another guy who we drafted high and traded away. Lewin was a piece of a different trade when we rented Brian Ramos. We also got Devin Saltiban and Jesus Vargas in the deal. So we ended up spending pretty high to rent Ramos the 2 times that we traded for him, because Lewin's turned into a pretty darn good left-handed major leaguer at the age of 23, 15-8 record, 3.46 ERA this year, over 200 strikeouts, and put up a 5.1 WAR for the Philadelphia Phillies. So the former first-round supplemental pick, 43rd overall in 2030, is a guy we'd love to have in our organization, but it is not the case, unfortunately. Juan Aguayo, been out all year with a torn labrum, still got another 2 to 3 months, so he hurt himself in spring training with the very mediocre stuff that he has at this point. Doesn't look like he's ever going to develop into a particularly big-time player. Aguayo is a guy that the worldwide scouting department was interested in when we had the opportunity to pick him up as a international free agent. We were scared off by the stuff. Some of the worldwide scouting department suggested that the well above average movement and control could make up for that. Unfortunately, we don't really have any new information to react to since he missed the entire year with a torn labrum. He's going to be 30 before he throws another pitch in the major leagues. Right now, he's got a 4.54 ERA over 103 major league innings pitched. Jonathan Niswanger, the Purdue product we looked at in the draft a few years ago, spent the entire year in AAA, put up an ERA of 6. He's going to be turning 25 years old in just 3 days. Really question what he's going to become at this point. He's fragile physically. His control looks like it's always going to be below average. His stuff hasn't really developed that much yet either. Thought he could be a pretty interesting right-handed reliever, but I haven't seen it yet. Unfortunately, the price for Swampy is still pretty high. You can see we have to give up one of the top prospects or one of the top handful of players on our major league roster if we wanted to make a move for Mr. Niswanger, and because of that, it's not going to happen. And last but not least, our longtime ace Mason Miller spent a second year in Korea this year, 8-9 with a 2.60 ERA. So he's been a pretty effective pitcher over in the Korean League, but doesn't seem like he's likely at the age of 38 to have significant Major League Baseball ahead of him at this point. Turning to some prospects that we've thought about in recent drafts and international amateur free agent periods. Relief pitcher Jesus Escobar is a guy who could be a potential starter. Was an international free agent signing from back in 2031. Made his major league debut this year with Pittsburgh. Allowed 1 hit while striking out 2 over 4 1/3 innings. Also spent some significant time in high A ball and a little time in AAA this year. Doesn't look like he's going to be a big-time major leaguer. Edison Faulo, still in rookie ball, started with the Yankees organization, now in the Pittsburgh organization, was a combined 4-3 in rookie ball between those two levels. And Josh Kiesler, guy who was picked in the 5th round in this draft this past year in 2036, guy that we were hoping might fall to us, but given the absolutely insanely bad control, would have been an interesting experiment, but it wasn't one that we were willing to do in the 5th round. Kind of got exactly what we would have expected in the one game that he started in rookie ball this year. Went 3 1/3 innings, and although he struck out 6, he also walked 6. And think that the problem with him is always going to be the control, even though we think that his stuff could be absolutely insane. Turning to some batters, Alvaro Cepeda, international free agent signing from almost 3 years ago. Really strange year. Started in rookie ball, where he was dominant. They promoted him to AAA, where he went 1 for 14, and then he somehow ended up in the majors, where he hit 250 and 56 at-bats, but only 1 ribby, struck out 23 times, and an 81 WRC+. Pretty good-looking potential defensive outfielder, but the personality and the strikeouts scared us away from Mr. Cepeda a bit. Cameron Rhodes was a guy that we seriously thought about taking with our first pick this past year. Went with college pitcher instead, and we'll be talking about him shortly when we talk about our minor league system. Rhodes hit just a buck 53 in 98 at-bats for the Rockies organization in rookie ball. Only 18 years old, though. Still looks like he's got a lot of upside if he meets his full potential. Bobby Vermillion, just a brutal contact and avoid strikeout profile. Makes the likes of Cabral and Brain and Hidero Endo look more like Rod Carew or Wade Boggs or Tony Gwynn with those horrible contact and avoid strikeout ratings. Split the year between A ball and high A ball. Struck out in close to 50% of his at-bats at each level. Hit just a buck 55 with a minus 1.6 WAR in high A ball this past year as a 22-year-old. Certainly don't expect Mr. Vermillion to have a big major league future. Butch Wall, 22-year-old, picked in the first round in the 2033 draft, still in rookie ball. So that's not a good sign. Hit 219 in 210 at-bats, but when a 22-year-old hasn't advanced out of rookie ball, probably not a good sign that his career is really going to be what he might have hoped it would be a few years ago. And Sawyer Wenda, right-hander who was picked in the first round in 2034, a guy who multiple members of the worldwide scouting department thought we should take a flyer on in a draft where we had a couple of supplemental picks. Hit 270 in 289 at-bats this year, but it was his third straight year spent entirely in rookie ball. But with that 132 WRC plus he put up, and the fact he'll be 21 years old around opening day next year, would expect that the Rays organization will be promoting Mr. Wenda up to A-ball next season. Still looks like he could be a useful major leaguer, but probably not a star. But enough talk about prospects who aren't part of our Oakland A's organization. Let's take a look at some players that may be able to help us down the line. We've got a very mediocre ranked farm system at this point, ranking 19th out of 30th overall. That being said, we have, over the course of this past season, promoted Arturo Uresti, who we think could be a big-time bat in the outfield for us for hopefully many years to come. We promoted Doug Weiss, who we think could be an important member of our starting rotation for many years to come as well. Sergio Palomares, who we think could be a useful fourth or fifth outfielder for us, also promoted this year. So a fair amount of talent has graduated out of our farm system to the majors over the last several months. Part of the reason why we've slipped back in the rankings. Only two top 50 prospects in the Oakland organization. Ernesto Comunez, international free agent signing from just about 2 years ago. Our top-ranked prospect at number 42 overall. 2-2 in 16 starts with our DSL team this year. Put up a 3.21 ERA. Struck out 11 batters per 9 innings, but he walked 5 batters per 9 innings. Still put up a 2 WAR. He's an 18-year-old throwing in the mid-90s. Has to work on his control, but certainly think that he could become a very interesting starting pitcher for us, particularly with that really good stamina. So Comunez, we're still very optimistic that he's going to be a contributor in the not-too-distant future. Our other top 50 prospect is second baseman Luis Godina, IAFA signing in 2033. Still has a potentially very well-balanced and above-average hitting profile. Not the greatest defensive prospect in the world. Hit 296 in rookie ball this year with an OPS of over 1,000. Through most of the year, his rankings didn't really suggest that he was ready to move up to A-ball, but after 2 really good years in rookie ball at this point, and the fact that he's 20 years old, would have to expect that we'll be moving him to A-ball next year, regardless of what his ratings look like. Yeah, at this point, it looks like he can probably hold his own as well. The contact's still not exactly where we want it, but here sitting in November, certainly no reason to think that he won't be starting the year in A-ball next year. Our first round pick this past season was Mike Blumenshine, the college pitcher out of Brown. Unfortunately, he only pitched 3 games for us in rookie ball before shoulder inflammation ended his season on August 1st. Still has another 5 months of recovery, so he's barely going to be ready, most likely, for the start of the rookie season next year. When we picked up the soon-to-be 22-year-old, we're certainly hoping that he'd pitch a few games in rookie ball, do really well there, and end up getting promoted to A-ball, maybe even high A this year. Unfortunately, in addition to getting injured, he put up a 7.45 ERA over the 9 2/3 innings that he did pitch. Wasn't all negative. Struck out 16 batters over those 9 2/3 innings. But disappointingly, with that shoulder inflammation, not going to be able to get him into the development lab this offseason. So kind of a wasted first year for Blumenshine, but still hoping that he ends up becoming a big-time pitching prospect for us. And we do have one big-time pitching prospect who could be helping us in the majors in the very near future, possibly even opening day, or it wouldn't be an opening day starter, but possibly even next April if he makes the team. Jesus Saldana, IAFA signing from 2032, wants to be in the majors, was 8-7 with a 4.15 ERA in AAA for us this year. Put up a 3.4 WAR there, 4.6 combined this year between AA and AAA. Think his stuff is above average, his control a bit above average, and think his movement can still get there. Has a 5-pitch arsenal. Probably only going to be a 5-inning pitcher, but he's good at holding on runners, and there is a lot to like about Mr. Saldana. Think that he could certainly mix in well with the likes of Ferris, Dora, DeCaro, Patterson, Weiss, maybe even still, Bobby Garland and Kamani O'Banner. We've got a lot of options for our starting rotation next year, and Saldana is on the short list of guys to put into the mix. He's a guy that we're going to explore signing to a extension. His demands have been lower than Doug Weiss's. We'll talk about that more next episode. Actually, there's no point in wait until next episode. We can kind of show you what we've been thinking about on that front. Doug Weiss, 24-year-old. We think he's going to be a really good major league pitcher, but looking for a 10-year deal, and he's looking for over 113 or almost $113 million for 10 years, including $18 million in those out years. Given that he's almost 25 years old and he's fragile physically, I think at this point we are inclined to just go year to year with Mr. Weiss. Mr. Saldana, though, is a bit younger, a bit less injury prone, and definitely has a more expansive repertoire of potential pitches, and certainly a profile that looks like it could be just as good, if not better, than Mr. Weiss's. Not quite the same stamina, but still a lot to like about Mr. Saldana. And if we think about a 10-year contract for Saldana, he's looking for a little less than $80 million, so about $30+ million less for Mr. Saldana. He's currently not in the best mood to negotiate with us because his morale is so bad, but still something that we're probably going to explore either very shortly or perhaps after we've promoted him to the majors, and maybe he'll be a little happier to discuss things with us. Darnell Selvey is our 5th and final top 100 prospect. Picked him in the first round in 2035. Got the batting average just above the Mendoza line this year at 206. Did have 11 homers and 267 at-bats, a 111 WRC+, Certainly would expect the 20-year-old to be playing A-ball next year. We also have 5 prospects ranked between 101st and 200th. We'll talk about that crew as well. Amare Alcindor, 8th round pick from 2032. Hit only 235 in 311 high A at-bats this year, but did have 23 doubles, 11 homers, 86 WRC plus overall. Decent speed, decent defensively, like his range in the infield, although his arm isn't great. And still think the bat for a middle infielder could be interesting. Not the greatest prospect in the world, given that he's going to be 23 years old soon, but Psycho still has some potential to help us down the line. Right fielder Wilson Pedraza, IAFA signing from 2031, hit just 224 in A-ball this year. Did have 22 doubles and 12 homers, was slightly above average offensively. Still think the bat could be interesting, but kind of average speed, average defensively. The switch hitter is not a big-time prospect in my mind. Jorge Orellana, another IAFA signing, split the year between rookie ball and A-ball. Hit 385 in rookie ball in the DSL. Then he did bat just 204 in 162 at-bats in A-ball. Still think the power from Orellana could be very interesting. Decent speed, decent defensively. The contact and the ability to draw walks are likely to be the concerns. But he's only 20 years old. He's already played in A-ball. He's durable. He's got high work ethic. Definitely a guy who might have a future for us as a corner outfielder down the line. Andres Vigo, a guy that we did end up picking with that supplemental pick in 2034. We talked about some of the guys that we had missed out on when we were going over other teams' minor league systems. Vigo's personality was always a concern of ours, but we were impressed by his potential home run power. 20-year-old hasn't made it out of rookie ball, and he's also never hit above the Mendoza line. He's been below replacement level every year. Likely going to promote him to A-ball next year just for a change of pace and see whether he can sink or swim, but not necessarily counting on Vigo to be a big-time prospect. Quite honestly, if we do peruse the trade market this upcoming season and it turns out that Vigo has some value, he could be a guy that we might be willing to include in a deal to bring someone who can help us now on board. And the 200th ranked prospect in baseball is Daniel Blanco, 9th round pick from 2032. Split the season between A and high A ball, where he was a combined 17-3 with sub-2 ERAs at both levels. Certainly would expect that we'll see him in Double A next year. Doesn't really have the stamina to be a starter, but solid movement, solid control, still working on his stuff. Like some of his personality traits. Think he could potentially be an interesting right-handed reliever down the line. Don't necessarily see Mr. Blanco as being a big-time contributor, however. And one other guy that we wanted to mention who somehow is still showing up as number 5 prospect in baseball, even though he's not supposedly among the top 200 prospects. A guy we traded for from the Braves back in July, Juan Lovato, ended up in AAA for us, hitting .312, 16 homers and 40 ribbies in just 205 at-bats. 0 for 1 with a walk in a very small sample size in Oakland for us. I think that he's a bit overrated, certainly is incredibly overrated at the number 5 prospect ranking. And again, he's not showing up anywhere on the minor league prospect rankings for us. So I don't know if that's just a glitch in the game at this point or not. But he's another guy, part of the reason why we're potentially willing to move on from Yanquiel Fernandez is many in the worldwide scouting department have suggested is because Lovato, along with the likes of Sergio Palomares, along with the likes of Luis Taveras, could be a potential useful outfielder for us next year. Guy can also play the infield a little bit as well. So although I don't view Lovato as a top end prospect, still think that he's someone who could potentially help us a bit this upcoming season and perhaps further into the future. And with the off season getting underway today, we've also been spending a fair amount of time offline thinking about what we wanted to do in the development lab. Given that we've got 20 spots in the lab, we run the more complicated programs now, and then we'll have the opportunity to put close to 24 players through probably primarily defense-oriented programs, along with probably a few running and bunting programs come late winter. But for the time being, we're focused on significant programs for all 20 spots. Arturo Uresti and Nacogdoches Orellana, the prospect, both going to be working on trying to improve their power. Doug Weiss, Bobby Garland, and Gigolo Banner all working on secondary pitch improvement. Juan Ramos going to work on some plate discipline with him. Trey Saldana, big-time prospect, going to work on improving his pitch movement. Darnell Selvey, one of our top 100 prospects, going to work on his quality of contact. Ernesto Camunez, top pitching prospect, working on his control. Luis Godina, another top prospect, quality of contact. Jeremy Scholl and Chase Dora, a couple veteran pitchers, going to work on secondary pitch improvement, trying to improve their stuff a little bit. Jake Ortega, we're going to work on his gap power. Alejandro Landin, the second baseman, strength and conditioning. Chuck Huntley, increasing his pitch movement. Huntley, not one of the top 200 prospects, but was a minor league all-star for us in 2035. Split this year between high A ball and double A. In double A, he had a sub-2 ERA over 28 innings. Still think that Mr. Huntley could develop into a pretty interesting left-handed reliever for us, which is part of the reason we've got him working on improving his pitch movement. Mike Homer, you may remember him, the potential two-way player that we picked in the second round of the draft this year. 1-4 with the 7.36 ERA as a pitcher, and as a hitter, he hit just $167 in 138 at bats. So the 18-year-old has a lot to learn. We're going to throw the 18-year-old into the development lab, though, work on secondary pitch improvement to him. Prospect Amari Alcindor, we talked about, working on plate discipline. Mike Curtis, the veteran pitcher who we're kind of trying to salvage, will work on secondary pitch improvement. And then a couple of young outfielders that we just talked about who could be in the mix for larger roles next year. Gravedigger Palomares and Juan Lovato are both going to be working on quality of contact in the lab this offseason. And before we finish off this episode and really start moving forward in the offseason, we've got 6 arbitration eligible players this year. Tend to think that we're going to make offers to all of them. Could be nearing the end of our run with Brailovsky with the money that he is making. But definitely going to be looking to bring him back next year. He is also a guy that will certainly think about getting into the development lab. We talked last episode how we might need to pivot him to left field. Now, certainly, if the likes of Palomares, Lovato, and Tavares all work out, might not have that opportunity to move Brailovsky to the outfield, but with Brailovsky and Ramos both as first base DH types, and Colt Keith not looking quite capable of manning the hot corner on an everyday basis for us, still might need to figure out a way to move one of those guys, most likely Brailovsky, into a corner outfield role for us, just to ensure that we get as many big bats, and in the case of these guys, big left-handed bats into the lineup as possible. Brailovsky, Ramos, and Colt Keith are really the three only left-handed bats we potentially have on our major league roster next year. So it would be good to figure out a way so we can get all three of those bats into the lineup against right-handed pitching. Don't think we'll be making offers to Yanquiel Fernandez or Brooks Lee, and we've obviously got a ton of minor league free agents that we'll be thinking about what we want to potentially do with offline. And with that, we will call it an episode. Next time around, we will be back to begin the off-season. It's possible, as I often do, we'll have moved forward a couple days. We like to typically, at the start of the off-season, kind of shop a lot of the guys who are on our 40-man roster that we might be wanting to move on from. And since we can only shop 5 players a day for major leaguers, generally need to move forward a couple of days before we're feeling comfortable with what we may be able to or not be able to get in return for some of the guys who we don't think have a long-term future with the A's. So we'll likely have moved forward a few days by then, and hopefully we'll know what's going on with Kevin Patterson. Injured his elbow as the starting pitcher in Game 4 of the World Series. We, of course, ended up winning that game and winning the series, but still waiting to find out what's going on with that elbow injury and whether it's going to be a long-term thing or something that'll be resolved before the season begins. If it's a long-term thing, the likes of Doug Weiss and Jesus Saldana certainly have a much higher probability of being in our rotation come next April. But it's going to take us several more episodes to find out exactly who's going to be on the roster in April. We're going to start working on the off season next time around. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.